Guess who got distracted again? I did. Well, actually, I didn't really get distracted. I actually wanted to see if they would actually review the last Megacolony card, but they didn't. So I'm just going to come out with this video right now. Today, on the Dark Device, we're going to be talking about Megacolony Battler S and Megacolony Battler M. Which were cards that came out 3 days ago. Like, I think it came out, like, I think Monday, if I remember correctly. But anyway, let's actually talk about, like, both of these particular cards, because for one, they're Megacolony Battler cards, which I thought was pretty interesting. Do not get me wrong. I wasn't really expecting any more of that particular series, and because of looking at this, we need to see if it's really even any point of making a Megacolony Battler like deck in general, but I highly doubt it. I don't think we'll ever see that unless we get a grade 3 that is a Megacolony Battler, in which that particular case, I will definitely have to see how that card would actually play. But with all that being said, let's actually get this started. Let's first talk about Megacolony Battler S, the grade 2. Auto. When this unit is placed on rearguard circle, call Soul Blast 1. Your opponent chooses a card from their hand, calls it to the rearguard circle as rest. They draw a card, and that unit cannot stand during the next standby phase. Your opponent's card's auto abilities cannot activate from this call. Then, from the drop zone on turn 1, if your opponent has no stand units, discard a card from your hand, call this card to an open rearguard circle, and so charge 1. Then you have the grade 1 that is Megacolony Battler M. When this unit is put on a Guardian Circle, this unit gets shield plus 5k until the end of the battle for every 2 of your opponent's rested units. Then, when this unit is retired from Guardian Circle, if your opponent has no stand units, call this card to an open rearguard circle and soul charge 1. Alright, so looking at these two particular cards, they're not really that bad. I'm noticing that Bushiroad has been making a lot of defensive options for Megacolony, which is actually a good thing. For a prime example, we're starting to see more cards come out that allows us to draw cards, which is actually pretty good. If you notice from like the new stride that we're going to be getting, the Venom stride that we're going to be getting, it has the ability to retire one of your opponent's units, and if you couldn't retire, you're able to minus 10k to your opponent's unit, which is actually a pretty good thing as well. Then you look at from a standpoint of the last V collection, clan collection that came out, we did get a Brilliant Blister, where again, Brilliant Blister is a very good defensive option because it allows us to, let's say, whenever your opponent attacks, you put this on a Guardian Circle, Soul Blast 1, discard a card, and you're able to choose one of your opponent's units, and it cannot stand under any circumstances, which is actually pretty good and a decent trade-off. At the exact same time, it also bounces itself back to hand if your opponent has no standing rear guards whatsoever, which is actually something that is pretty interesting as well. But my thing is this. So now we got Megacolony Battler M, which gives shield for every 2 your opponent's rested units, which kind of reminds me of Griceforth. Even though, like, actually, yeah, I think, yeah, Griceforth, I forgot, it also did count Vanguard as well. So yeah, it's basically Griceforth on a grade 1. Which is actually this card is better than Griceforth, because at least you don't have to wait till your opponent's Vanguard attacks. You know, even though it'll be like a lot better, because that's where you want to put the most shield, is like against your opponent's Vanguard. So in a way, it kind of makes sense. And then of course, like if you're going against XL, you're definitely going to be like plussing hard because they're going to have so many units because they want to go wide. So of course you're going to be plussing. But honestly, even with this, oh yeah, and then you're able to call it to an open rearguard circle as long as your opponent has no standing units, which is another good thing about the card. So you can wait until your opponent's final attack and then actually use his card and then get the card back onto the field for free just because. But and it allows you to soul charge as well, which is actually pretty good as well. I can definitely see this card being played at 2. I don't think I can really see this card being played at more than 2. Like maybe 3, depending on how like the meta becomes. But I can definitely see it at a must 2, because you're not only gaining decent amount of shield, you're also gaining the possibility of calling it to an open rearguard circle and soul charging it, especially in a format like premium format where numbers are clocking very higher than ever at this particular point. So I can definitely see this card being used a lot. Then when you look at the grade 2, the only thing I don't like too much is that your opponent draws a card for like replacing a unit from their hand, so they technically get a card back. The but then again, like Nubatama does it as well. Like there's times like they have like that one grade 2, I can't remember exactly what his name was, but you I don't remember if he was Counterblast or Soul Blast, but like when he's placed, your opponent calls a card from their hand, and then they get the draw card right after, which depending on the format is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because that would mean that if your opponent has to randomly draw a card, it's a possibility that they draw into a over trigger, which will give them the amount of defense that they need, but that will also mean that unless if they're playing a deck that allows them to put the over trigger back into the deck, unless if they're doing that, then it's kind of sort of useless. Because most decks can't necessarily do that, but on the contrary to decks like, let's say, Musketeer Neo Nectars, or what is it? Like OTT is another prime example of it because of their new stride. You know, that definitely caused problematic issues. But at the same time, when you look at it from a standpoint of V Premium, it's kind of a hit and miss. Because you will hope that they will be like a smartass and try to call like a trigger, but then they just draw into a grade 3 and that trigger could have been like their defense. But that's just me. But at the same time, I do like the fact that you're able to also call it from the drop zone to an open rearguard circle. But outside of that, I do believe that this is a decent card for, let's say, 2 things that I have in mind: Giraffe and Gunning Colio. And the reason why I say both of these particular cards is because it is using the original stun, which is something that Giraffe is doing, and Giraffe is also a card that allows that forces your opponent to call 2 cards from their hand to the rearguard circles, and then they're also like stunned at the same time. You know, it basically does kind of sort of the similar properties, which basically means 2 particular things. One, it might be the possibility that Giraffe will be our reverse card instead of what I previously thought Spark Hercules is going to be. Because I still believe that Spark Hercules might be our reverse card though, but right now is looking a lot more towards Giraffe, which is actually pretty good. But then at the same time, like I mentioned, it can also be used in Gunning Colio, and the reason why I say this is because even though it's not milling, you are still forcing your opponent to gain cards from the deck, so they can deck it. So it is a possibility for them to deck out faster because of a card like this. But there's something else that I'm a little bit interested in both of these particular cards. One, notice how both of the cards in certain circumstances can soul charge. Is all like when you look at Battler S, she can, when she's called from the drop zone, she can soul charge one. When Megacolony Battler M is put into the drop zone from the Guardian Circle, and as long as your opponent has no standing units, she can also soul charge one. Which means that our grade 3, whatever grade 3 we get, regardless if it's a reverse unit or not, or whatever that grade 3 is going to be a soul charge heavy card. Because I mean, you could also do like more counterblast units, but we do have like enough countercharging units and counterblast units in the deck, and we do have like a lot of cards that soul blast is a lot as well. So at the same time, I can kind of sort of see this happening. I can kind of sort of see why we're starting to have a lot of soul charging based units now. At the same time, like I mentioned earlier in the video, these are Megacolony Battler cards, which basically means that there is a possibility that you can use some of the older Megacolony Battler support. I looked through all of it and I came up with like maybe 2 or 3 of them to use. 2 of them are triggers, which one of them is a stand trigger, which I know stand triggers is kind of sort of like iffy in today's meta, but you can still use it. And you also have like the other trigger is the critical that goes into the soul after your Vanguard when your Vanguard attacks and it gains 10k. That's the other one. But then you also have, for a prime example, the other Megacolony Battler unit, which is A, if I remember correctly. A is a pretty decent unit because even though it's a grade 0 and I can definitely see this card being played at 2, it does allow itself to be put into the soul after it comes from the Guardian Circle, which could help with the soul charge, with the soul charge and everything else like that. And then of course you have Megacolony Battler E, which is also another unit that is a GB1, and you retire the unit to gain for your Vanguard to gain 10k once all of your other units is at rest. Which basically means that even though it's slightly counterproductive, it could technically work with Master Beetle, which will be an interesting concept though, but I don't know if that will really be worth it. Because like if you're like a unit short from getting an extra dry check, then it's actually worth it. But if you need that unit to stay on the field, then it's not worth it. Like you kind of get what I'm saying, right? Like it's kind of worth it, but it's not really worth it. But anyway, outside of all of that, I think both of these units are actually pretty good. I would love to see how both of these units fare in V Premium, and I'd definitely like to see how both of these units will fare in regular Premium format as well. But hopefully we get that grade 3 soon, because these reveals are weird as hell. So with all that being said, my name is Mrs. Zoo Nation, aka Savage Armor General Giraffe. Just don't play Megacolony Battler B, Megacolony Battler D, Megacolony Battler S, and Megacolony Battler M at the same time on the field. Otherwise, you're going to jail.